A statement of measurable annual goals, including academic and functional goals, designed to meet the child's needs that result from the child's disability to enable the child to be involved in and make progress in the general education curriculum, and meet each of the child's other educational needs that result from the child's disability.
So let's break down measurable annual goal. Measurable meaning that it has to be observable progress, annual meaning for the year, and goal meaning that skill set that you hope to achieve within that year. And so that is what a literally measurable annual goal means.
Right, and what's the purpose of it? Well, we want to have some sense of where we're going when we develop the IEP. We want to say, okay, in a year, what is it we're hoping Johnny will achieve? In a year, what is a reasonable expectation that these special education services will get this child to? And that's one of the reasons we want to know where we're starting from. But the next step is, okay, we know where we're starting from. Where do we want to be in a year? And I think that the fact that it's an annual goal is important to keep in mind. You're writing it as an annual goal doesn't mean that you may not revise it sometime during the year, but you really are looking at what's a reasonable expectation that in a year we're going to achieve. And from a parent's attorney's perspective, this is where a lot of the times in IEP meetings we end up in some dispute, because ultimately what you want to achieve in a year is as much as you think is reasonable to achieve, but you don't want to be writing goals that are designed just to get to a point where in a year we can all say, yep, we expected this child to do that in a year, check that box off. And I see a lot of educators making goals that way. Well, we want a goal that we can attain. Well, no, we want a goal that's going to get the child to a point where they're making meaningful educational progress. And so that can be any number of things. And there's no limit on how many goals you have, and there's no requirement that there be X number of goals. I've seen many IEPs with 2 or 3 goals, and I've seen some with 30. Now, you could ask a lot of educators whether or not it's terribly useful to have an IEP with 30 goals, because that can be really onerous on the people who have to actually implement the document. But there's no federal requirement that there be any particular number of goals in an IEP.
Well, hopefully when you and your team are deciding upon the goals, that you as a team realize that this has to be something that's doable and achievable. And while we certainly all want to shoot for the stars, you have to be realistic as a team, and I think that's kind of what you're talking about.
It is, and then measurable just means that we have to have some sense of whether or not this is a goal that can be measured, and the law requires that it is measurable, so that the people who are implementing it in a year can say, we do or do not believe the child has met this goal. And another sort of footnote is that it used to be the case that goals and objectives were required in IEP. So you had the long-term goal and short-term objectives. Right. Some states still require those objectives, but it's not federally mandated anymore.
Right. And that's where we come back to each state takes these mandates and does them differently. And so they might go beyond them, but they can never go, as you say, to the floor below. Right. They can go to the ceiling, but not to the floor below.
That's right.